I obviously was on the road all of last week, and so I didn't see the hearings, but I followed them, and I'm getting a summary report of everything that's taken place. What I've seen thus far, I have to tell you, after all of the hearings that I took part in as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, all of the briefings that I took part in, many of which were classified, I really haven't learned anything new.
Really? That was Secretary of State John Kerry remarking on the Benghazi investigation moments ago during an online chat today. Those remarks come the same day as brand new reports reveal that the administration message, those infamous talking points on the deadly consulate attack, were revised 12 times. All right, keep that number in mind. They were revised 12 times before they were handed over to Ambassador Susan Rice to share with the country on the Sunday talk shows. What's more, these changes were made as the White House and the State Department were trading emails with the intel community over what the ultimate talking points handed to Susan Rice should say. But that is not the story the White House Press Secretary Jay Carney told us last November.
What the White House and the State Department have made clear that the single adjustment that was made to those talking points by either of these two institutions were changing the word consulate to diplomatic facility because consulate was inaccurate. Those talking points originated from the intelligence community. They reflected the IC's best assessments of what they thought had happened.
Joining me now, Steve Hayes of the Weekly Standard, a Fox News contributor who was the first reporter to break the news of these edits, and today a follow-up report by Jonathan Karl of ABC News, which is also excellent reporting, but yours largely overshadowed for reasons all of our viewers understand about, how some folks who are right-leaning and write for conservative-leaning publications like the Weekly Standard get ignored when they break huge news. And yet now that it's out with ABC, everybody's in a scramble. In any event, I tip my hat to you and to John Karl, and I want to ask you about that quote. Jay Carney, the single quote, the single change that the State Department and the White House made. They've made clear one change, and that was consulate to diplomatic facility. That's just not true.
Well, there are two possibilities here. One, what Jay Carney is saying is demonstrably false, if he means it in sort of a broad way. Or two, he could be engaged in the kind of careful language, careful phrasing that we've seen in scandals of the past. So it's possible that Jay Carney meant literally that people at the White House or the State Department did not actually make the changes. And based on everything I've seen, based on my reporting, looking at internal White House emails, looking at the talking points, it does seem as if somebody at the CIA, probably Deputy Director of CIA Mike Morrell, was the person who actually physically input the changes.
Come on.
No, I'm not kidding.
No one was asking Jay Carney who was at the laptop computer actually entering the changes. The questions all along were who was behind it.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that this may be the level of sort of careful phrasing that we've now reached as this scandal really begins to boil. And look, I mean, you've had Ron Fournier from National Journal, who's been covering White Houses for ages, point out something in a very good column today about this entire episode, in which he looked at some words that Jay Carney used yesterday, where Jay Carney said nobody has made changes here at this White House. And Fournier wondered, I think correctly, whether that means that Carney is sort of drawing a circle of protection around the White House and leaving the State Department and perhaps the CIA to fend for itself.
Well, because we certainly heard him saying no one at the White House or the State Department last November made any changes except for one, from consulate to diplomatic facility. Let's just take the viewers through the chronology. I have a lot of things I want to get through with you. I've tried to put together the chronology from your report of what went down. Okay, so let's pop up the first one. This is the CIA initial draft. Steve Hayes reporting in the Weekly Standard last weekend. CIA's initial draft. It talked about this attack being linked to Islamic extremists, Ansar al-Sharia, and a need for jihad, and warned and reminded them that at least 5 other recent attacks had taken place in Benghazi. Victoria Nuland of the State Department responds, according to your reporting, that the State Department has serious concerns with that draft of the talking points, pointing out that Congress will use them to, quote, beat up the State Department for not paying attention to warnings. So what happens next? Pop up the second one, but watch it. CIA's next draft comes. All right, they delete the references to Ansar al-Sharia, this al-Qaeda offshoot. But Nuland writes back, the changes did not resolve all of my issues or those of my building leadership. And then next you see the White House weighing in saying the State Department concerns must be taken into account. And then they had a big meeting the next morning, Steve, and where did they have it?
Yeah, this big meeting was something called a civets, where some people check in on a secure video conference and other people gather physically at the White House or wherever they choose to have the meeting. And they discussed at some length, we're given to learn that they were looking at these talking points. That was the subject of the meeting. They talked about how they could coordinate the story and what they were going to say coming out of the meeting. This was still during the revision process, remember. The CIA started the revisions a little before noon on Friday, September 14th, and the final revisions after they'd gone around internally at the CIA, then a little more broadly in the intelligence community, and finally in this interagency process that involved policymakers at the State Department, at the White House, and elsewhere, emerge a little after noon on Saturday morning,
at
September 15th, right, after this key White House meeting, and that's where they look totally different than what we had seen just 24 hours
and
earlier.
Let's just show them a little bit of that. Let's put up the first full screen that shows the CIA did an initial version, and then they did a second version, but look at and then they did the third version. Now we know they did 12 from Jonathan Karl's reporting. But look, just look at the version between 2 and 3. We've highlighted it, and then they've got black lines through the words that got taken out after Victoria Nuland over at the State Department was saying how concerned she was. So all that gets wiped, gets scrubbed, and you can see the shortened version of version number 3. And now take a look at full screen number 2, some of the terms that got taken out. What got taken out? Jihadists, Islamic extremists, threat of extremists linked to al-Qaeda in Benghazi, at least 5 other attacks in Benghazi, and concerns that previous surveillance had taken place of the consulate in Benghazi. That all got removed, and that, Steve, is what we now believe led Susan Rice to go out on the Sunday talk shows and say, don't know anything about terrorism, but they were very upset over a video, and that's what led to the protests.
Yeah, at least in parts, that's what led Susan Rice to make those claims. I mean, I think, she had to go quite a bit beyond those initial talking points. I mean, those final talking points, because frankly, there wasn't much information. So she had to go well beyond what was in those talking points and sell a different story. Let me go back and just be very precise and be fair to the White House on this. When we're talking about 12 different revisions and 12 different drafts, it should be said that some of those drafts took place within the CIA. The early drafts took place within the CIA, and at times the CIA itself took out language that was somewhat forward-leaning. There was one time where the initial description of the attackers in Benghazi was Islamic extremists with ties to al-Qaeda, and the CIA actually took out the phrase with
that's
ties
right.
to
And that's
al-Qaeda.
all in your report. But
now,
I want to get this in. I want to get this in before you go, because we're up against a hard break. One thing that is helpful to Ms. Rice and the administration in these talking points, the original ones from the CIA, this is the third full screen, is we believe, based on the currently available information, that the attacks in Benghazi were spontaneously inspired by the protests at the embassy in Cairo. I mean, they're going to point to that and say this was about spontaneous protests, just not at Benghazi. Quick last word, because we're up against a hard break.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly what the White House will say, and it was in the original CIA talking points. So the White House can point to that. I think the CIA put it in because the CIA had offered warnings about demonstrations, potentially violent ones, at the embassy in Cairo on September 10th.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't explain why they were so determined on downplaying the terror angle. Steve, great reporting. Thank you. Kelly's Report on Zimmerman is next.